What up, punks? Welcome back to another episode of the Pop Culture Punks podcast. I'm your host, Phil, and across from me is your boy,
Josh.
This week, we've got a guest on with us.
Yes, we do.
Mr.
As
Bears
promised.
is back.
We've been
again.
working hard to make this happen.
We've been working hard.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me on board. I appreciate it. This is great.
It's like a 1-year anniversary thing.
It is,
it is,
kind of
every
is.
summer.
Right.
Back in
funny.
back in Milwaukee. So this week, we'll be talking about Blade Runner 2049. It's been a couple years since the movie came out. We'll probably talk about the first one too a little bit.
Yes.
We'll see where we go, but we're excited to geek out about it a little bit. We stayed up till 1.
Way too late last night.
Night watching it, so we're dedicated to the craft. So yeah. So how you been doing, Mr.
I'm
Bears?
great,
been
man.
up
It's
to?
good. Now that I'm retired, man, the life is good, you know?
Nice.
That's good.
Congrats on that.
Yeah.
Was that this year? So
yeah, this
officially-
is
okay.
was my last year teaching, so.
Nice.
I start my Humane Society job next
Awesome.
week.
Oh, cool.
Volunteer job. I'm going to be working in the operating room with the vets, which is kind of fun.
Wow.
Yeah, so that'll be cool, and see what else comes up.
That's
Nice.
cool.
But otherwise, life is very good.
Life's good.
Good
Nice.
deal. Do you have
That's
any big... I feel like even in our 20s now, we're dreaming of all the games we're going to finally get to play in our retirement. And like movies are like...
You say
So
that.
do you have any big long-term goals or things you're excited to pursue?
Well, I don't think so. Other than, stuff I've already done.
Sure.
Like I want to keep up our podcast, Cubic Shenanigans. We want to keep that up. I always play a game over the summer, and maybe now because I don't really have a summer,
Sure.
I'll play Skyrim a lot more. And
Gotta add on.
Yep.
and you guys talked to me about Divinity, so I'm going to check
Yeah.
that out. And so other things like that. But it's the weirdest part is people keep asking me, like, how is retirement?
Sure.
And I really can't say until the end of August.
Yeah.
Because I've always had the summers off while I've taught in the last,
So it's
18 years.
Sure.
Business as usual.
It's like
right
every
now.
other summer, yeah.
Yeah.
So once it comes time to go back to school, then I'll be like, oh, yeah, this is awesome.
It just keeps
Nice.
going.
Perpetual
So, yeah.
summer.
So I don't have any other really big projects other than my usual modeling and hobbying stuff
Nice.
that I do, painting and building models and playing in tournaments and stuff with my co-host. Yeah, it's all good.
Awesome. And then speaking of Cubic Shenanigans, how has that been going? Because
Really
how long
good.
have you guys been running that now? It's pushing-
Almost 2 years.
Cool.
We're up to episode 31.
Nice.
When
Awesome.
probably every other month we do 2, so it's
Sure.
maybe 3 every 2 months. And we've like tripled our listenership.
Wow.
I think
That's
we
awesome.
had close to 600 downloads last month or something
That's
like
dope.
that. And for us, for the niche that we're in, we feel really good about that.
Yeah,
that
that's
was
exciting.
awesome.
That's really cool.
And it helps when you go to tournaments and stuff too.
Yeah.
And you're wearing a t-shirt and people ask you about stuff.
Sure.
The most exciting thing I think with that was we played in Brendan's tournament. He actually runs a tournament, and it was in April, I think, this year.
Nice.
And it was kind of cool because all these people who've been listening to the show, they come up to you and they say, "Oh, you're that guy on the show." And so you meet your listeners.
yeah.
You meet your listeners.
That's
I
cool.
never did that before.
Yeah.
And it was really
that's
fun.
Super cool. Awesome.
That was very fun.
very cool.
That's cool.
So
Sweet.
yeah, it's going well. And
Awesome.
It's
Good
fun
deal.
and good labor of love. You know how this works.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I remember like that first time sitting in your on your kitchen area, and we were like okay, how do we because we were still noobs at that point, and
Yeah.
I was just like,
Sure.
I kind of know what mics to buy.
Yeah.
like that
And now
was
we got
it.
like
I still got these
80
babies.
episodes,
Yeah, it's
so
still good.
yeah. So here we go. But awesome, cool.
that's cool.
Well, I'll let you take that away, Phil. And
Well, I was just going to
Along
ask
with the-
one question with
Yeah, go
with the
for it.
podcast. Do you
Mhm.
find that like a lot of that your fan base is built through going to tournaments and stuff, or do you do social media?
I think a lot of it is word of mouth now that we've
Word of
got a
mouth?
certain critical
Sure.
mass.
yeah,
And so we've also gone on Spotify.
Okay.
So that helps a little bit. It
Mhm.
incrementally it adds
Yeah.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking of going on iHeart at some point.
yeah,
And so when you add yourself to those venues, it helps a little bit. But I think a
Mm.
lot of it is just word of mouth. And to a point, Phil, I think going to places, because the guys who run the tournament usually are really kind and they say, "Hey, does anybody want to plug anything?" So I'm not proud. I stand up and say, "Hey,
check out my
yeah,
podcast.
buy a T-shirt."
That's
Yeah.
cool.
So
Nice.
whatever.
Awesome.
So yeah,
That's cool.
it's good
For sure.
We're really
Nice.
happy with the progress we've made, and
That's cool. That's got to be really cool just having people like recognize you and just come up to you and stuff.
It's
Maybe
fun.
someday we'll get that
Yeah,
too.
we'll see.
We'll have to start going to conventions or
There you
something.
go.
yeah,
So-
we've actually had people start like doing Patreon type stuff for us,
wow,
which is
awesome.
really helpful because between the hosting fees and all that stuff, it adds up. You know that. It adds
Yes,
up for
it
a while.
does.
So having people being willing to part with their own money is, I really feel privileged that people do that. But that's really cool too. We've never had that before.
Yeah. Awesome.
So yeah,
Good
that's
deal.
all those good things. All good
That's
news.
cool.
Wicked cool.
Nice.
All right, man.
So
Hosty host.
2 years ago, Blade Runner 2049 came out, which was 30 some years after the original Blade Runner, right?
I think
Which
it
is
was
a long time for
79,
a
I'm
sequel
gonna
to come
say.
out.
Yeah.
I think it was
Um,
79, but
79, yeah, something like that. And in my mind, that was kind of crazy because I had seen Blade Runner growing up like once or twice maybe, and I didn't really like register what it was at the time. And then I see Blade Runner 2049 come out, and I'm like, this looks kind of cool. And Josh and I are into cyberpunk stuff, and
As
we
much
just-
as you
we
can
like
get.
like the
Perfect.
vibe. And there's
Yep.
really not a ton of cyberpunk stuff out there, like good quality cyberpunk stuff. So I was like, oh, this is cool. And I think I went to the theater by myself to see it because my wife was like, nah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, so you go.
which I love going to the theater by myself. But I'm curious for you, Mr. Bears, did you see the original one like
yeah, we just talked about that
in theaters?
Yeah, I did,
Okay.
and I've seen it way too many times. As I told you, 10 plus. I don't know. I've seen the original many, many, many times.
I'm curious what it was like for you to like. Were you a big Blade Runner fan throughout the years? And I'm curious
Yes.
what it was like for you to have this sequel
was-
finally made.
It was amazing, and it was a little, as you can imagine, for all I think I don't think I speak for a lot of people who are big Blade Runner fans. There's always that anxiety of, are they going to meet the expectations?
Yeah.
I was especially concerned about the music because I couldn't even spell Vangelis. You know, when I first
Yeah.
saw the movie and then I
Sure.
heard the soundtrack, and it was like, where's this guy's music?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I listen to Blade Runner stuff all the time.
I still listen
soundtrack
to that
stuff.
at work. Like, it's
But-
so good.
The guy who wrote this soundtrack was so true to the Vangelis kind of
Who did
feel.
the music for the
I
new
wished
one?
I could tell
Do
you.
remember?
And I'm not
Might look it up.
big on names, if you want.
I will Google
But it
that
was-
right
You wanna
now.
Google that?
Yeah.
Definitely created the atmosphere that you needed.
Yeah, it's very, very similar. It's kind of cool.
So I was really excited, and I thought they did an exceptional job of continuing the story in a way they needed to. Now, one of the things I would tell people is I think it's really important because Denis Villeneuve, who was the director, he actually had 3 shorts made.
Those are the animated ones, right?
Well, the one's animated, and it's actually one of the directors, Watanabe's one of them, but Cowboy Bebop was the other director of this thing.
Oh, wow.
So I know you guys know who that is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had to mention
Absolutely.
that because I was like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, you guys will know that.
Yeah.
But the first one was about what happened. It was about the blackout.
Oh, sure.
And so it's really good because you see the movie and they talk about it and you're like, yeah, so what?
yeah.
And once you see that short, you're like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Then they have another one that's Wallace, this super, super evil guy. He makes Terrell look like a babysitter, right? In the first movie. He actually, it's when he first petitioned to create the new generation of Nexus.
Interesting.
And so it's 6-7 minutes long, but you get the feel
That's
for
all
it.
you need.
And then at the beginning, we can do spoilers here. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Spoilers
it's-
cool?
yeah,
Okay.
spoiler
It's
galore.
so-
So,
years, yeah.
at the first part of the new movie where Kay meets Sapper Morton, the
Yeah.
big guy,
Yep.
there's a short about Sapper
Oh, really?
interesting.
that kind of then when you see the end of the short, you're like, that's how Kay found him.
Wow.
And it's, and that's who he is. You realize who Morton is, and you even have more empathy for him than you do in the movie. But I think it's really important to watch those. It gives you a lot of good
Should've watched those.
background.
Right.
It's maybe about 20
find 'em.
minutes of total viewing.
I think they're all on YouTube.
Yeah, they
I
are.
saw that
I
they're
can
all on
guarantee
YouTube.
you, if you look
Yeah.
up Blade Runner shorts or Blade Runner 2049 shorts, all
Yeah.
3 of them are on there.
Awesome.
And it's definitely worth watching. I know you guys will just go
We'll probably
crazy
Yeah.
about the blackout one because it's
Yeah.
all anime and it's
Awesome.
just,
Oh, that's cool.
it's so freaking
Also, to chime in quick, looks like music was composed by Hans Zimmer and
Yes.
Benjamin
Oh, wow.
It was
Wafish.
Zimmer, yes, it was Zimmer.
So
Yeah, you're not.
which-
you can't
yeah,
go
you're
wrong
like,
with Zimmer.
no.
No surprise. that
yeah,
I
when you
nailed
said
it.
that, yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that soundtrack was on all
For
my
sure.
devices like within a minute of coming out of the theater.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I know from just like time of life, one of the things Phil and I were talking about yesterday that we're really interested to hear your opinion is, and I think, I don't know exactly how Phil would explain his excitement about the cyberpunk genre for himself, but I think for me, what's super fascinating about it is it's dystopian about something that for us is still growing. Like it's almost, it's very predictive of like the future. And I feel like we lived through like one of the rungs on the tech evolution ladder, whereas I feel like you have the experience of like you've lived through a couple of things, and not to oust you like that.
No, I'm ancient, man. It's good.
but for but seriously, in terms of your wisdom of like what do you think about the cyberpunk genre is maybe important for this generation, or like when it's done well versus I know some people over glamorize like the sex and violence and stuff, but for something like this where it's really dealing with the questions of humanity and like how far do we push stuff, like do you feel like any of that has been part of your experience? Or
Sure. And I think it has a lot to do with the change. That's a great question. And I think it has a lot to do with the change in society. And I think recently the fact that we're even talking about socialism, we're talking about what that would be like, the dystopian function in both the Blade Runners is a lot of it. You see the gentrification of society. You see like Decker or you see Kay. They live in these squeezy little apartments, and everybody's kind of crammed into. Although they had a lot of space in Blade Runner because J.F. Sebastian had like a whole building to himself or whatever.
Yeah.
But then you see this very, very mega rich group of people at the top, the corporations, whether it's be Terrell or whether it be Wallace in the new movie.
Yeah, and he's got this entire pyramid basically to himself.
You're right. Yeah, just
exactly.
walk around.
And Kay's living in a little box.
I think the whole fact that it is dystopian, I wish more people knew what that word meant, because that's what these things are showing you, how it can get, what it can get to be like if you give up certain things, if you do certain things. If you make certain changes to society, then there's always a consequence. I mean, the fact that we can sit at a dining room table and do a podcast that's going to reach out to the whole world, literally. I mean, just like, my show, when I look at the number of countries.
Yeah, it's crazy. Just like the random people that you're like.
Why would somebody in the Czech Republic listen to my podcast? It's crazy.
Yeah.
But that technology is amazing. It's so cool. And that I've seen change, obviously. But all these things that we have, all the tech, and you see the tech in the movie, both movies. And you're like, wow, that's fascinating. That's really cool that they can do that. But is that what, to your earlier comment, is that what being human is about? Is that technology really adding anything to the quality of life?
Interesting.
I think so. For me, I think that's a question to ask. I know I just spent a week visiting with my mom.
Yeah.
She's going to be 90 next year. She's getting pretty old, and she's very, I use this word not in any negative way, but she's very anachronistic in that she's probably the only person you know in your whole life that doesn't have an email address. I mean, think about do you guys know anybody that doesn't have an email address, literally?
I don't think so. No.
You probably don't.
I feel like you're born with one at this point.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, kind of right. But my mom doesn't have one.
Yeah.
She's just stayed in this place, and sometimes I'm almost jealous of her that she can be in that place where she's disconnected when she wants to be. I can't. None of the three of us can be disconnected. None of your listeners can be disconnected. No. So I think the movies through that time period, when you see the tech that's come, you haven't seen it. When you look at it, is there really an improvement in the quality of life? Is there really an improvement in our moral values, or any of those kind of things because of the tech? Wow,
it's a big
That's kind of the interesting part about cyberpunk for me is that like high tech, but like basically the more advanced technology gets, the more, like you said, gentrified society gets, because like there's people who can afford to have this technology that is basically required at this point to actually like be a member of society, versus like people who can't afford it kind of just get pushed into the gutter. And I feel like you're seeing that nowadays, aside from actual like physical augmentations, like our lives have become like deeply entrenched and like intertwined with technology. Like we can't do many things without these, like our cell phones anymore. We can't like even just doing a podcast, like you got to have social media and you got to interact with people, and like social media is almost like a requirement these days to like be a part of like the social public conversation, and having, like you said, having email, and like you can't have a job without a computer now, like
Right.
and there's still people who can't afford to have computers, and like, it's kind of like as technology advances, like on one hand it's a good thing because then we see like medical advancements and like cool things happen that can actually help people who are poor and stuff, but at the same time, like those underprivileged people can't afford to have that technology, and then it becomes this weird identity drift kind of thing.
Yeah,
and we're kind of seeing that now, I feel.
One thing you had mentioned that's really, I think, perceptive, you talked about the more technology we get. When you look at these movies, guys, and I want to ask this question to both of you, it's what I see is, and even you asked about over time what I've seen, the more tech we get, the less human and connected we become. And in these movies, you definitely see that. Mm-hmm. So what do you guys think about that premise? The more tech we get, the less human and less connected we become.
Yeah, I think kind of building off of like what Phil was saying with the high, because I know Mike Pondsmith, who wrote the Cyberpunk 2020 RPG book, like that was his classification, was high tech, low life, essentially, or like low, you know, that there's awful people that get a hold of this, and all of a sudden it's them waging war not only on the elites, because I feel like that's almost a romanticized idea. It's like, oh, now this technology has come into the common man, and so now we can fight back, or we can, you know, rise to where these people are. And I think what I love about Cyberpunk is it's just very realistic of human nature, and which I think sadly is, or the reality is that it's bent towards doing evil to each other. And so I think what, you know, the romanticized part of it that I think is lost sight of is like, I mean, look at social media. It should be the greatest thing in the world. Like the fact that there have been countries that have overthrown violent dictators just by being able to organize. Like that's an amazing thing that they were able to subvert something that was genuinely like vile and evil. However, you also have the same platform being used to bully people and to drive people to, you know, very unhealthy mental states because of the social pressures that have come with what social media, like, quote unquote, means, and this, like, quote unquote, social credits that are involved with it. And I think from that side, I think we've made tech too much of our identity. And I think that's why I love cyberpunk stuff, is like, what happens when technology is your identity? What happens when you are linked to these augmentations or to these electronic things that, because they are not or because they're fallible, they could fail? And if you've built your entire personality or who you are, your life or whatever on your phone or your, you know, like I remember like the biggest fear in the world being like, oh my gosh, I hope my floppy disks don't break, you know, or like something like that, you know, like I don't want to lose all my family pictures, and you know, and that's a reality. But now it's like, oh, but now you have the cloud and you have all this stuff, and it's like, that's great, you know, we don't have to worry about losing, you know, my 1-year-old like cake eating photos or whatever. But there's also, you know, the downsides of like, well, now it's just we've become like digital hoarders in a way too. And I think like we've become obsessed with just pulling things in and being connected to everything, and we're 2 steps from like wanting to just fully integrate ourselves into just like everything. You can go on YouTube and you can find how to do pretty much anything, you know, which is amazing. You know, like I've used that as a tool to help me in my career, but I think it can also, like Phil and I spent the whole 1.5-hour drive yesterday talking about, I think sometimes even for us, we struggle with the pressures that can come of like, if you're watching a certain YouTuber who has or is good or is talented at doing something, that you start projecting yourself on them of like, man, I guess if I buy a bunch of really expensive retro games, I can run a retro games, you know, show or whatever. Right. So I feel like it's fascinating how much technology is not a salvation for the human heart. It's more of a mirror to me. And I feel like that's what I love about cyberpunk stuff, is like how much it does that. But anyway, that's my mini tech rant.
I think it's interesting because technology is kind of displayed as like a double-edged sword in some ways. Like on one hand, it provides a lot of convenience, and it has helped provide like a dissemination of knowledge and understanding that we've previously haven't had. Like I was watching a movie the other day, or I think it was Bill and Ted. I was watching Bill and Ted.
Nice. The first one?
Yeah, the first
Sweet.
one.
So good.
And they were trying to like
That's great.
figure something out, and they're like asking if the guy at the gas station has like a dictionary or something. And I was like, nowadays, if we had to figure something out, like you can resolve arguments just by looking it up on Google in 2 seconds now. And it's kind of just interesting how technology has made information so available, or it has made it so we can look things up on YouTube and consume entertainment like at our convenience. But I think in the same way, it's made us complacent in a way to a lot of different things, whether that's complacent towards injustice or complacent towards whatever, or complacent towards our friends and our family. Because like I don't need to spend the time to actually go meet my friends in person, because I can just quickly chat with them on Facebook or whatever. And I think that is convenient. It's like, it's nice for me to be able to talk to my mom, who's like all the way up in the UP, like, and she can't have a cell phone. So it's like, I can talk to her on Facebook Messenger.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, like, how many of my friends on social media do I ever actually like talk to in person? And it's kind of like technology creates this weird, it's almost like in a way in Blade Runner where like the actual technology is the human being, like the android or whatever.
It's replicants.
It's a similar sort of thing for us, where like technology has created this weird dissonance where at one point we feel extremely connected to everybody, but also extremely alone. Like, and I mean, that's the common discussion nowadays. Like, is social media isolating us, or like kind of, but it's kind of like that concept of technology creates so much convenience and stuff that it creates this like complacency. So
well,
I don't know.
I think it's fascinating, and kind of diving back into the movie specifically too, especially in 2049. Like, I feel like the theme is more wrapped in Wallace and his corporation creating the next, like the better human. Like now they can procreate, and now
that's what he wants.
It's
that's
like,
the
now
goal.
they're better.
It's not there, but he's
and so I think that to me was fascinating as you were saying that, of like, some of the things I picked up on this second viewing was, now it's these replicants fighting back, because it's like, because they can't define who we are. Like, we're not slaves anymore. We're not these, because I feel like, in different like scientific subgenres of, robotic movies or cyberpunk, or like you have like iRobot, for example, and it's like the AI, and the AI goes crazy, but it's all these like faceless robots who are just kind of like, Will Smith's gunning him down in the street, and you're like, whatever. It's just like a chrome thing.
Well,
but
in the movie, Joy is an AI.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's no way that I mean, obviously, Kay doesn't consider her an AI.
Yeah.
And so I want to. I have a question for you guys that relates just to your things. I got a bunch of things here. So the first
got more notes than we do.
I know, right?
The first question I have, and it's kind of an overarching thing for the movie, I think, is I want each of you to tell me what it means to be human. Ooh. What do you think it means to be human? Because then we can relate this to a lot in the movie.
Yeah.
What do you think it means to be human? And then I'll tell you my definition when we finish.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to say, I was like, you're not pinning that one on us.
You go first.
I go first.
It gives Phil more time to think.
Yeah.
And I can just bounce off whatever he says.
Yeah, right. So I'll kind of frame it, I think, from like my own personal worldview, but also kind of looking, because we're addressing this through a fiction lens, which I think is the most fun, and that's why I love this. But so I think from my own personal worldview, I think in being a Christian, my view of what being human is having a connection and understanding with like what your purpose is, like having purpose, and beyond, like a purpose beyond what any human can create for you. Because I think specifically kind of, addressing like Blade Runner, I think it's fascinating that the whole movie is about these replicants and these robots that have been designed for a specific purpose. Like, there is a human being who has said, this is what you are and this is what you will do, and you cannot deviate from this. Well, then they do. So does that mean they're not human? Does that mean they're more human? And all of a sudden it creates all this stuff up in the air, because you're like, well, I don't know, because Kay has feelings for this AI, but this AI isn't real. Kay isn't real. So like, but is he more human than some of the humans, because now he's feeling and he's caring for things and stuff like that. And so I think, I want to say it was Lewis. I can't remember the exact quote, but he described like how he believes in the divine, basically, of like
C.S. Lewis.
Yeah. Okay. I want to say it was C.S. Lewis, that I wish I had the direct quote and I just need to memorize it, but he described how like he believes there is divinity and there is a heaven and all this stuff because he's like, this world can't be it. He's like, there's too much majesty in this world, but there's too much other stuff tainting it. He's like, this can't be it. Like there has to be something greater. And
this world points to something greater than something like that.
Something like that. So essentially,
is that the quote you used in the music video for my song?
I think it was actually.
Wow.
It might have been. Yeah. That was also a couple years ago. But
that's funny.
But just that idea of like, I think to be human is to understand that there is something outside of any other human being or any other piece of physical creation that we can interact with that defines us.
Okay.
Which I think elevates us over anything. So like if the president says I don't have value, sucks. Like that's not true because you do not dictate my value and my inherent worth and stuff like that. So, which I think is the beauty of like how we've been designed to be, racially and genetically and socially different is like because we're all inherently valuable. So I think that's the worldview perspective. I think from the scientific perspective or the sci-fi perspective, I think being human is having a deeper sense of worth and meaning that can't be, kind of like I said, can't be attacked or changed by any other person that exists around you.
Okay.
So for Wallace to be able to say to Kay, like, no, or Decker or whoever, like, no, you're not human. You're a slave. You're my slave. I made you. Like, you're supposed to do the work that humans don't want to do. Like, I don't think they're human then because there is something that they were created, even though they have a creator, that creator gets to define like who they are. Versus like having inherent worth that can't be challenged, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So,
see, I think I disagree.
And I
with
think
that.
you're wrong.
Oh, go for it.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
I'm glad you did too.
The thing
This is what sucks about going war first. Like a big question.
No,
well,
it's
maybe
fine.
maybe I don't though. Maybe at the end we'll
go
agree.
for it.
But
yeah,
I think in my mind, I think what defines something as like quote unquote human, which I guess is already by trying to define what is and isn't human, you're already like creating a distinction between like the worth of like animals or whatever and human beings.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
But I think what maybe distinguishes, and I don't know enough about science and consciousness, but I think from the like cyberpunk perspective, the question is like a crux of like a lot of different questions of like, if I can give birth to another another thing, does that make me human? Or if I'm capable of loving, does that make me human? Or if I'm capable of expressing emotions, does that make me human? And I think a lot of that stems from the idea of being able to like see yourself outside of yourself, kind of like being able to like perceive yourself beyond your programmed.
It's related to Josh, your comment about higher power or perceiving something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting in a lot of these movies, the moment that they start questioning whether or not they're human is often the moment they start being able to see what they really are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, and that's, for me, it's always been hard watching movies like this because in my mind, I'm like, of course you're human. Like, you're capable of loving people. You're capable of feeling things. You're capable of seeing yourself as being something more than what you were created as, kind of. Like, and it's like, in my mind, it's like if it walks like a human, if it talks like a human, it behaves like a human.
It's a duck.
And it's a duck. And it's also capable of like perceiving beyond itself, kind of like having that weird existential drift that we have as humans of like, we feel like we're built for something more than what we're doing, kind of.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the crux in a lot of these movies where as soon as they're self-aware, like that's when it's like, am I human?
Yeah.
Am I better than humans? Am I like the next evolutionary step?
Yeah.
And maybe that's the question is like, is there something better than human? Kind of like, and that's where I've been seeing a lot of movies pushing the envelope of like, it's no longer like, am I human? It's, no, I'm better than humans because I'm stronger, smarter, faster. Like, plus I have what they have. So it's kind of like it's hard to describe what it is, the quality that makes us actually human. But I feel like it has to do with self-awareness in some sense of like being able to like float above ourselves and analyze our own internal processes objectively to some extent. Yeah. Which I think is a part of that like soul or divine power. And I think it depends on like where you think the soul derives from.
Yes.
And I think in these movies, the question is like, is the soul an actual thing, or is the soul a conglomeration of all of these things?
Yeah.
Of like your ability to, and stuff like that. Like, is the soul something that can be gained?
Yeah, because I think even, that as you're describing it, it made me think of, have you seen Ex Machina?
Oh, yeah.
And it makes me think of the scene where the guy is, Ex Machina spoilers, but he's not trapped, but he's in this house of this like genius robotic AI scientist.
Yeah.
And towards the end of the movie, he starts going crazy because he's like, am I a robot? Like, am I an AI? And there's that horrible scene where he's in the bathroom and he's like gashing this giant cut down his arm because that was how he saw all these other robots like show that they weren't human, is because it was like that's how they could tell. And so he tests this and he's bleeding and he's like, wait, so I am I not? And he can't decide, like he's unsure. And then all hell breaks loose and it just kind of goes crazy. But no, I think I actually very much agree. Like I think that was an added step that I probably missed, is having that awareness. Is it's not just I think it's inherent in like but then also being able to like look at ourselves and tell ourselves the truth of like, what am I, and like what am I capable of, and what do I think, and what do I feel, and
like we're capable of not operating based on biological assumptions.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like that's
depending
on
how you think about social determinism and stuff.
But I feel like that is what separates us from animals. Is animals, like I've for whatever reason I've been thinking about that recently, is like my dog keeps walking around, like wanting to be pet and stuff. It's not because she's like, I'm emotionally longing for companionship. Like, please love me. She's just like, that feels good. Like, to do it more. Or like, I'm
when
hungry.
These people are around, I get food and I get scratched.
Like, that's it.
And they're not around anymore, and I'm sad.
She's not like when she's staring out on her little window thing. She's not like, wow, I'm a dog. She's not having these existential thoughts of like, what does it mean to be a dog?
Yeah.
Like, what do dogs think and feel? She's just like, I'm looking for squirrels. I need food. I need to pee. Like, that's the extent of it. So, but anyway, to pass it off to Mr.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
It's interesting that, because a couple of my questions I had here is, does having a purpose make us human? I asked that question. Does being able to procreate make us human? So both of you brought those issues, and I had those as questions.
Sure.
I think for me, it's an issue of having a soul. Now, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, when I look at your dog, or I look at any animal, I look at any plant, basically, and obviously animals are a little more sentient because they can make they have a certain amount of self-choice that they can make. But animals make choices based on instinct. And when animals make choices, they don't, and here's where I think the difference is. They don't make choices based on what's right or wrong. They don't even understand the concept of right or wrong. People have a soul, which means that as they develop, as their minds develop, they understand there's a difference, and people can choose to make moral decisions. I think that's what makes a human a human. Human can make moral decisions, whether they're right or wrong.
Yeah.
They can do that.
Sure.
It doesn't matter what the decision is. And then when you translate that definition to the movies, both the movies, I think that all of the characters, including the replicants, are human. Because they all, and here's the thing, I've always wondered this since I first understood as a young man what a lobotomy was. Because I worked in a home, I volunteered in a home when I was a high school student. And I heard people talking about, oh, so-and-so was lobotomized, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, wow, so when you lobotomize somebody, you basically take away their ability to make decisions, to make moral decisions. That person is no different than your dog, Josh, in that they know when they have to go to the bathroom, they know when they're hungry, they know when they have to sleep, they know when something hurts. They have literally, when you lobotomize somebody, you remove their soul, I think. Because they're not a human being anymore. They really aren't. They're just a living creature. They no longer can existentialize like you guys both talked about. They can no longer think about something bigger than themselves. What you've done is you've removed everything that makes them human so that all of their behavior is instinctual. Think about that.
Yeah.
Am I not right about that? I mean, I think that's...
I think...
And that's kind of scary to me.
Yeah.
When you're doing that for humanitarian purposes, it's cruel to have a person going around who's not a human being anymore. But for me, the definition is being able to make moral choices. Now, whether those choices are good or bad choices, it doesn't matter. You can still make bad choices to be a human. I think about Wallace. And Terrell is like I said before, he's like a kindergartner compared to Wallace. Wallace is a human being. He makes horrific choices. He has a twisted black soul. Some people would say he doesn't have a soul, but I don't agree with that because I think that he makes choices. Mm-hmm. He treats the replicants like product. Mm-hmm. That's all they are, is they are things to him. Yep. Mm-hmm. Even Love is a thing to him. Although Love is, I think, is as or not more human than a lot of the other characters. Because she just shows the whole, as dark as she is as a character, she shows this whole
she's
rainbow.
Angry. She's
enraged.
Yeah.
Yep. She's sad. She's happy. She tries to be neutral in her emotions. But I would challenge you to list any character in either movie that doesn't make some kind of decisions. You look at all the replicants in the first movie. Leon made choices. He chose to kill Holton. He made that moral choice.
Yeah.
And it was a good or bad. He knew it was not a good thing to kill that guy. He knew it. It wasn't like he was just this brutish cargo handler that, oh yeah, okay. And he wasn't just following orders from Roy Batty. You could tell, like, when he was beating up on Deckard, he was taking joy in that. He was enjoying. There's that masochistic streak, which went into overdrive with Love. Oh my gosh, there were some times when she was doing stuff, she just took joy in hurting people.
Oh, the glass in the hand scene. Oh
my gosh,
brutal.
You just
she
saw
started
her
tearing up in that moment too. I think, didn't she?
Which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
You think about Roy Batty. Roy, he had emotions that he didn't even know what they were. That was part of the whole thing of being a replicant. You didn't even know what you were feeling, but you were feeling something. Was he human? Oh yeah, I think he was, because he had those. He was making choices, good or bad. And by the way, he ended the movie making a really good choice.
Yep.
Look at what was the name of the Pris? Look at Pris.
Yeah.
She manipulated JF. Sebastian. She knew exactly what she was doing. That wasn't some kind of a machine type robotic reaction. She manipulated him to get him to allow her to come in. She knew exactly what she was doing.
Well, and that's the interesting part of the first movie is the whole crux of like the bad guy's motivation is they're doing all this stuff not because they were programmed to do it. They're doing it because they want to extend their life, because they want to live longer. They want to enjoy. And that's interesting that like everything in that movie is actually these robots, quote unquote, operating outside of what they were programmed to do, which in some ways, like, that's human. Like, as humans, we're constantly doing things that we shouldn't be doing, or we're constantly operating, quote unquote, outside of our programming or whatever, which is interesting.
Yeah. So for me, that's the definition of being a human being.
Interesting. So here's kind of, so I have two follow-up questions to that. And I like how this discussion is turning, because I think we always try to bend away from just being like, well, what would you think of the movie? And like, how was the cinematography? Like, that's not as fun. Like, what's the deepness? And so so the first question I had was, so based on your answer, like going back to the idea of like the patient who's been lobotomized and the removing of like who they are. So do you think, based on that premise, like if it's the consciousness and being able to make decisions and have a moral framework and to think more than just our basic biological instincts, do you think that means that we lose our worth, or do we become does our physical body or who we are become invaluable or worthless?
I suppose my answer would be, I suppose it depends on how you define worth. For Wallace, all of his replicants had worth, because they did something. They served a function, whether they were... And it's interesting, don't you think, that Wallace was able to, I guess, he kind of could dial up their humanness, their humanity. Because you think of Love, and she was full-on human being. But then you think about the replicant that dropped out of the plastic bag, and she was just there kind of huddled. She'd just been created. She didn't have any feelings yet or anything else. And he created her that way. She had a purpose, and she was almost created lobotomized. When you watch the short, it's called Nexus Dawn, one of the shorts. He has this guy next to him, and he just tells him, take this piece of glass, cut yourself. The guy takes the piece of glass, cuts himself. And you think about it, there was absolutely no emotional reaction. And he goes, did that hurt? The guy went, yes. Wow. That's, again, Wallace created that person with that level of humanity, with that level of, ability to make conscious choices. So,
and I think that's the interesting part that these movies pose is like there really isn't a definitive line where we can say somebody is or isn't a human, really, because even with like the replicants, like you can get a sense of like, okay, at this point they're probably still a robot, but then they love somebody, like, okay, well now we're like, are they human, are they not human? But it's still hard to say like definitively, okay, they're human now, or like,
because of a certain thing that
if these
did.
like quote unquote robots are like subservient and they're slaves and they're just doing their job, they're not complaining, like they don't feel pain because you've programmed that way. As soon as they're capable of seeing like they shouldn't be doing this to me because I have worth, well, at that point, are they a human now?
Yeah.
Is your ability, or even before their ability to see that they don't deserve to be treated this way, were they still a human? Because even like when we enslaved people, like there's probably people who didn't see like that.
That's literally what it was. Like one of the first proclamations was like the 3/5. It was like, slaves in America were only considered 3/5 human,
right?
Which is horrible. And when you think about it, that is a dystopian reality that happened. It was like,
so it's like,
we turned to human
who
people.
are we to get to decide whether or not somebody is or isn't human?
Yeah,
but did that make them less human?
Exactly. And so I think
to them, they were still at that point whereas I defined it, and we're all defining it differently, but they were all able to make, no matter how anybody else defined them, and this is to your point, you mentioned earlier, no matter how anybody else defined them, they were still human beings. They still loved, they still hated, they still knew what was right and wrong. Whether you said, you're a slave now, okay, I'm still me, I'm still a person. And it was interesting, Phil, when you were saying something about, that where's that point where, and in the movie it was hard to, like, if you look at Sapper Morton, he was very human.
Yeah.
He was very human.
You've never seen a miracle.
No, and when you look at the short and you see what he does in the short, what he gives up, and he was, quote, a skin job, and people were calling him a skin job, even all these years later, 30 years later or something, it's still a thing. He was very human. You look at that group of rebel replicants, including that young one, the blonde, who literally went to Kay's apartment to give him the experience of actually touching Joy. And he touched Joy because of her. She didn't have to do that. That wasn't something she just did because somebody told her to do it. She had to do that. And you look at that group of replicants, they were all as human as any of the human beings in that movie. You look at how they acted. They were self-aware.
Yeah.
They knew that they wanted something. What was the quote I got from the leader saying, dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do. I'm going to talk about something with Kay as well, but with that quote. But that was that group that said that. That's not a robot. Robots don't think that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because at the beginning of the movie, Kay is almost presented as like inhuman. Like he's kind of this inhuman detective that is like we almost perceive him as like he's just a robot doing his job, his duty. In his mind, as the movie goes on, as we're kind of wrestling with this question of humanity and stuff, like he's also breaking down until you get to the end of the movie and he's laying there on the steps like dying, and you can see like the pain in his eyes, but also like he's kind of like
he gets
relieved, like he gets it, and like he doesn't have to wrestle with this existence anymore, kind of.
To to your point, remember during the movie 3 or 4 times he went back in for a calibration, they call it.
Yeah.
And that was all about not showing any emotion because they didn't want the replicants to be like they were the guys who started the blackout. And they want to make sure that they didn't do those things. But that didn't make it so that Kay didn't have.
Yeah.
He obviously had feelings for joy. He spent, it's implied that he spent a huge amount of money for that emitter.
Yep.
So she could become real, quote. So he had feelings. He just was able to control them. So when he went in for his calibrations, but then there was that one calibration where all of a sudden he failed. And they're all like, okay, what's the deal?
Yep.
What do you, but it didn't mean that it just meant you probably met people like this yourselves who were really able to suppress their emotions.
Well, that's interesting too, because the movie clearly has like, the people in the movie clearly have a definition where like we would be uncomfortable enslaving these people if they showed these emotions or because they have these calibration tests. So like clearly there's a line that if it was crossed, these people would no longer be comfortable with enslaving these things. But like they're already crossing the line. That's why you need to have the test in the first place. So you're already like undermining your whole system of like defining
what is
their
valued
humanity.
and what's not.
Yeah. What
Like
is humanity?
the only reason they're not human is because you're suppressing their ability to be human. And so like it's kind of like the same sort of thing of like who are we as humans to define whether or not something else is or isn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
and I
think that's the question the movie is posing in some sense.
Definitely. And I think what's fascinating too is how until Kay goes to Decker's daughter, he's convinced that like he has the scapegoat of like, no, I'm a replicant. Someone put this here. This is fake. That's just what it is. And so he can tell himself, which is interesting. Like, I feel like that's equally also when you really, really dive into the psychological side, that's a very human reaction to something traumatic is like, yeah, that's just what happens. Like something really bad happened to me. Like
it's not real.
I just, that's just what happened. But then he goes on the journey and he finds, and I think that's one of the first scenes where he like, there's other scenes where you can kind of see that he's like holding back, or there's like a little bit of like it's robotic, to frame it. But when he's sitting in that chair and she starts crying and she's like, "This is real. This is someone's memory," and he kicks the chair and curses and like just screams, and you're like,
that's the first like emotional reaction you really get out of him.
Yeah, and it's because, and I'm sure it's because his whole, as we've been talking, his whole existential view of himself in the world has been completely subverted, because now someone actually did, like, this is a real memory. Is this my real memory? Did I actually do this? Am I actually a human? Is this is any of this stuff actually real? Like, am I like?
And I feel like as soon as that happens, like
stuff just
almost
dives.
like you become human.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you start questioning whether or not you are human, I feel like that's
you are.
That's
What is
the
it?
point where like
I am.
Yeah,
kind of thing?
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it's. I think they even say that in the first Blade Runner. She like when she's talking to JF Sebastian. I think she's like, I think, therefore I am. And it's kind of like just this simple question of like, even the first movie is more subtly asking the question of like, are these things human? And it's weird because Kay's conception of himself is formed around what the people who created him told him.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you're just a robot.
Yeah.
These memories are implanted. And those things are true. Like, the memories are implanted because he is a robot.
Yep.
But that doesn't necessarily mean he isn't. And even it's kind of like, is being a human the only way that you can have like the same rights as a human being? Like, if you can feel pain, do you deserve to be prevented from like, you know what I mean? So
yeah, and so going on that, I think one of the other, I was trying to remember the other question I had when you were sharing your definition of humanity, Mr. Bears. But I think the thing I had that I'm curious what you guys think is like, the discussion around humanity and what is human is talking about like robots, but the only reason we can have that discussion about what is human is because we ourselves were human and we came first. It's not like we both kind of came into being at the same time. It's like we were before, and now we are literally jumping into, in our world, AI, and how does that work, and what do robots look like? And so part of me is we're getting to a point where like we could program, you were saying, Mr. Bears, like the qualification of like good and bad decisions. Can you make good and bad decisions? The replicants knew that they were making good or bad decisions, but like what happens, does programming does a moral, like, how to phrase this, I feel like this is getting really heady. if I program a robot to have a moral framework, does that mean it actually understands morality, or has it just been given a limited amount, and maybe a wide berth, but a limited amount of what is good and bad?
Now when you ask that question, you're now stepping into another movie.
Sure.
Now you're stepping into Matrix.
Yeah.
It's really what you're stepping into, because when you watch Animatrix, which was a series of animated shorts as a supplement, in some ways an explanation of the backstory that got us to the first movie. The humans created a sentient race of robots, and these sentient robots wanted nothing but to be left alone and just live. They wanted to exist. Were they ever human? No, they weren't human. They were a whole new sentient race of beings, which, given the size of the universe, I'm going to wax philosophical here.
Sure.
People ask me, are human beings the only intelligent? No. That's my answer. No. Simple answer. God created the universe with billions upon 1 times 10 to the 26th stars. How many planets does each one of those stars have? And you're really going to tell me that human beings are the only intelligent race of sentient beings in the whole universe? Okay, that's fine. If you want to believe that, that's cool. I'm okay with that. All right, if that's what you want to believe. So this is a whole sentient race. The robots in the Matrix is sentient. You look at the third movie. What happens? The robots finally compromise with the humans because they want to exist. They just want to be left alone. And Agent Smith is a threat to both the humans and the Matrix. So the Matrix is threatened enough by Smith to say, okay, look, we're going to back off. You guys live your lives. We'll live our lives. We won't kill you anymore. We won't put you into whatever.
Giant batteries.
Yeah, we'll turn you into batteries.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's different than saying we're human or not.
For sure.
To get back to your comment is that you can have a separate race of sentient beings that are not human. You can.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting because this Blade Runner movie kind of touches on that a little bit with the rebel faction. They kind of hint at we're better, we're better than them, so we deserve more in a sense. But they don't really dive into the androids are actually metahumans. We're the next evolutionary step in.
They're we're so different because we're elevated.
We were created by humans, but we're better than them. We're stronger than them. We can think faster than them. We can and we can still feel all of the emotions they're feeling and make the same bad, good, neutral decisions that they're making. And yet we can live longer than them. We can, and so to your point, it's almost is asking whether or not they're human beyond the point. Are they more than human? Well, in which case that's even scarier because then
it's a whole new set of questions.
We're basically being they could just wipe us out because they're better than us.
Terminator. So I'm going to circle around.
Jump into another movie.
So I'll circle around, Phil, to respond to that because that's an interesting point. But in the Matrix, the machines, the AI, the Matrix, doesn't make any moral choices. It is basically when it makes a human into a battery, or it it does the little seed pod things and it puts them in a battery chamber, whatever. That's not right or wrong to them. They're not thinking about that at all.
It's instinct.
It is.
Survival.
It's survival. They want to get bigger. They want to have more, whatever, and they want to survive. They're sentient because they can make those choices, but they can't make moral, or they don't make moral choices. That's not right or wrong to them. It isn't. They don't think of it as wrong. It's just what it is. Agent Smith is the only exception to that, and he's a threat to both. He's something weird. He's something unique, right? So in Blade Runner, are those people still human? Yeah. And to what you said, the rebels, we're better than they are. Well, there's a lot of human beings who think that about themselves, right?
Yeah.
We're better. We're this. We're that. We're more powerful, or we have these things that you don't have, and we're better than you. We already think that. And it's not physical stuff. It's other things. So does that make those people human? Yeah, they're very human.
Yeah. So it almost just justifies their humanity by
I think so.
Being able to look at other human beings and see yourself in them, but also comparing yourself. And I think it's another part of the process because to jump to another medium, the show Westworld has a lot of a lot of these sort of questions posed of like,
yeah.
Because the robots in that show are programmed,
Good.
and they have like these little tablets, and they can kind of turn their emotions up and down and do all these crazy things. But at some point in the show, like he introduces like these personality tics to them to like make it feel more real, and he basically does it to make them like become sentient in a way, and their sentience is like shown through their ability to bypass their programming and like deviate from the program.
Yeah.
But then it even circles back around of like, is your deviation already programmed in the program? And it's kind of like the same questions get asked in that of like, we're better than humans, therefore we like, and that's the whole second season is just like, we're better than humans, like we need to take over kind of. So it's the same sort of thing of like, there's humans who already think they're better than humans. And so does that almost just make them more human?
Well, and I think
with their ability to like perceive themselves in relation to others.
And I feel like that's what's really interesting and I really find fascinating about Cyberpunk 2 is I feel like in a real way, like Wallace is the god of Blade Runner 2049. Like he literally is God. Like he is like not a metaphysical omniscient being, but he plans all this stuff and he gives them his image and he projects on them the way to think and to feel and to be him. And so I think that's a really fascinating commentary on like, you know, like programming, you know, and even like our quote unquote programming and our consciousness and our souls and our individuality and stuff, because like Kay, I can't remember if it's Decker who says that or if it's the leader of the rebels who's missing the eye, where she alludes to the fact that like it was designed that Kay would think that he's the one. Because they needed a diversion.
They needed a decoy. He was the decoy, absolutely.
Right. So does that? So then it almost subverts all these things. So like, so is Kay not human because all these things he's feeling? Because I feel like that's part of. And I'm not saying that that's what it is, but I'm just curious what you guys think of like because what we're saying is he's felt all these things through the whole movie, and I feel like that's the ride of this journey is we're coming along finding things out as he is, and then all of a sudden we're like, holy crap, he's the kid, he's real, and then it's like, holy crap, he's not the kid, and like, holy crap, someone put all this stuff in him.
That's the interesting part of it though, is in Westworld asks the same questions of like, just because they're programmed and just because their program tells them to do these things, does that make them any less human? Because technically, depending on how you think about like social determinism and biological determinism, like we're technically programmed at birth and then through like social interactions in childhood and the mix of nurture and nature, like we're kind of programmed to do certain things. So like, is my personality created by my like social interactions growing up, or like are the decisions that I'm making now my free choices, or are those decided by my like programming? Like I think that I'm making free choices. I think, and I'm not trying to get into the whole philosophical debate of,
right,
but it's kind of like the illusion of free will in some senses. Like we experience and feel like we have free will, but then somebody tells us like, no, this and this is why you're making those decisions, and you're like, frick, like I'm more enslaved by my own like mind and personality than I want to believe that I am. And it's kind of like with robots, because we're the ones who programmed them to be that way, it's easy for us to distance ourselves and say like, no, like you're just doing this because I told you to, like you're a computer. But like we're just biological computers, kind of. In a way. And like in Westworld, they start to have like memories, and they start they start remembering things that happened to them in the past, and that starts making them feel emotions and anger and like wanting to rebel, and like that's just a human thing. Like we have memories that inform our emotions, and they make us do dumb irrational things because we're just like in some ways controlled by our like emotions and stuff. So it's like, are we just programmed in a different way, but like still programmed? I
think another thing so I'm going to kind of segue here.
Yeah, that might be beyond this movie.
Getting big.
So another thing that I think is interesting about Kay is he has this epiphany, and I think his epiphany moment, this is when I think it happened, was when he is walking back along the one catwalk, and all of a sudden that huge, gigantic joy hologram comes, and he looks at it, and it's like, you look lonely, you know, blah, blah, blah. She's saying all these things to him that Joy always said to him. He kind of sees the black eyes, and all of a sudden he's going like, wow, that I actually felt something for that thing. He doesn't see her as who she was anymore. He sees that thing. He gets this flashback of the Sapper quote about "You've never seen a miracle." He gets this flashback about dying for something. All those things happen all at once, and then all of a sudden you see him look down at his gun. And do you guys remember what the next scene was?
He's driving
to go after Deckard and save Deckard, and ultimately to get Deckard to Anna, which is his daughter.
Yeah.
So think about the intensity of humanity and that was all of that stuff, all those things going through his mind, and that decision to sacrifice himself, because there was a good chance he was going to. How can you get more human than that?
Well,
So,
even
and
right at the end, when he brings Deckard to the building, Deckard's like, "Why are you doing this for me? Like, you don't have to do this." And he's just like, "I don't know." It's almost like he like does know why he's doing it, but he doesn't. And he's like, it's almost like he's learning he's learning what it means to be a human, to do things outside of what he's programmed to do. And he's just like, because I felt like I had to.
They told me to kill you. I did the exact opposite.
I did the opposite because I didn't feel like it was the right thing to do. And that's like, oh, snap. Like, that's a human thing.
Yeah. Which gets back to what Tyrell said in the first movie. Tyrell said about, we give them memories because they're learning. They need some kind of a cushion for their emotions. And you think about Roy, how Roy was so schizophrenic. I mean, at one moment he was compassionate. The next moment he was just like, kill him. And what he did at the end of the movie, he was learning. He was a child emotionally. So he was learning what emotions were. That's really human. We all do that as we get older. So I think that moment for me in the movie with Kay, because at first all I see is this huge naked woman on the screen. I'm like, what the hell is this about, right? Yeah. And then I realized that it was it was the culmination of all the other stuff that Kay had seen and experienced, and ultimately was when he truly became human. To me,
it opened his eyes to like what was really happening, and he could make that decision himself. Nobody ever programmed him or told him to do that. That was totally him. Versus, there's a quote from Serenity where Shepard Book had died, and I think it was Jane said,
Shepard,
if you can't do something smart, do something right. So that made me and I thought about that quote. Now that I can't remember it, but I thought about that quote when I thought about what Kay was doing at the end. It was a very smart thing to do, but it was the right thing to do.
Yep.
And so that ultimately that was a very human decision to make. So here's another thing. So Joy is who she is, or is she? So two things with this. Can Joy and Kay love each other?
As two things that are not.
You could argue that Kay wasn't real, quote.
Right.
You've argued that, Phil. I think you kind of alluded to that to a point. You know that Joy wasn't real.
Yeah.
I think Kay can. I don't think Joy can. I think she's.
I'm waiting until I get your answers, and I'm going to comment. So what do you guys think? Can they love each other?
So I think before I answer, that was something that finally clicked watching this movie the second time that I don't think I fully understood the thematic weight behind having a replicant who's caring so deeply and doing all these things for an AI. Like, it's just strange. You're like, there is a level where you're like, that doesn't make any sense.
Is she
like,
loving a machine? This is weird.
And she's like making him dinner and like, wanting to like be by him and stuff. And so, I would actually, if you're heading down, I think Kay can feel and love, Joy can't. I would actually,
I think Joy can in the sense that she's programmed, like, because we saw her in other instances doing the same thing, sort of. I think she's like, that's just what she's supposed to do. There's something,
and I don't know if this might have been purposefully left out of the movie to elicit that she isn't human or close to being human in the way the replicants can't, is I feel like she doesn't have the desire. She desires to do what Kay wants to do, or to like bolster what he says, or like what he feels, or what. Because
the only scene that begs the question of that is when she goes out into the rain and she's like just enjoying the rain like for what it is. and she's not doing something that he wants to do. She's doing what she wants to do.
Yes.
And even him getting the stick for her suggests that she wanted something that he like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like he got it for her. He was doing something because it seemed like she wanted to like be free of. So it's like a hint.
There's enough there to like cause the question where I'm like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But there's enough also, with you mentioned Mr. Bears, the billboard that comes down, and I remember that being my first big epiphany too, of like when she's like, oh, like you deserve a name like Joe, and then that's the name that she repeats, or like she doesn't give him like a unique name, and then in the billboard it says a different name, because I feel like that would almost elicit that she cared more about like, you need to be an individual because you are.
I didn't catch that. I was like, why does she know his name?
Exactly.
But then
I was like, because
now
that's
it's like,
planted.
because it's just Joe,
exactly.
like Joe
it's
Smith.
Like, you look like a real good Joe. And I was like, oh, like there's a level of
intimacy that's not there.
Exactly. Because I feel like if it was between who Joy is and who Kay is, she would have said, you deserve a unique name for who you are. And she maybe, like, I feel like that would have been a moment where she, like, you should be called Calvin, or like whatever, like something off of
something unique.
Yeah, something unique, or something that uses his letter, because it's like, if this is your letter, let's change it to who you are. But she doesn't. She says what her programming says, and I don't know how to rectify the
But then there's the
scene
scene where he says, like, she's like, you have to take me offline and like put me on this thing, and he's like, but if this gets destroyed, you'll be gone. And she's like, yeah, like a real girl. So it's like, there's these moments where like it seems like she's longing for something beyond what she is. Like she wants to experience what it is like to be.
Do you think
human.
she has jealousy of replicants? Like, is she?
I think it's.
I see you staring over there.
It's not quite to the point where like she actually is feeling these things. I think it's because of her interactions with Kay that like it's like this weird learned. Like she's an AI that's kind of learning.
Right.
Like AI can learn things so far, and I think she's kind of like, she doesn't really like want to be able to die, but she knows that she's not human, and so she wants to like experience something of what it's like to be human in a way. Yeah. But I don't think that makes her human.
So
I don't know.
I think my answer to the question is I think they can. And my indicators are, first, the fact that Kay buys the emitter. Yeah. He had to have feelings for her to make that kind of an investment. He had to believe that she had some value besides just making dinner, whatever. I mean, he knew he was never going to have a relationship with her, a sexual relationship with her, but he still had all those other things that are important for interhuman relationships between a man and a woman. And when he did that, it was huge. I mean, and I think to what you were just saying, Phil, I think it was interesting because it almost implied that just because something is an AI doesn't mean that it can't learn, doesn't mean that it can't expand outside of its programming. And I think that happened with Joy. And the two times I would say that she truly became the closest thing she could be to human was when Love, when the plane crashed. Yeah. And she was like, Kay, she was afraid. There is no way that Wallace programmed into those AIs fear. There's no way he would do that, because what would be the value of fear, right? So the fact that she felt fear means all of a sudden she had become something else. She
does somehow care for Kay enough to feel fear that he's going to die.
And then what were her last words? Do you remember that?
I love you.
She said, I love you. She was never programmed to say that. Never. She was programmed to be this kind of cutesy companion who made dinner and called him cute names and lit his cigarette, and oh yeah, this is awesome. It's like the fantasy girl, that there's no responsibility, but she gives you all the benefits, That's kind of what Joy was supposed to be, a companion, but she was never supposed to be somebody who was afraid or felt emotion or could even express it. Yeah. So to me,
I forgot about the I love you scene right at the end.
Yeah, that was, and just the fact that you knew how angry he was when that happened, when she died. Yeah. Oh man, he wanted to rip Love's face off. You just knew it. Yeah. Yeah. So there was that in there. So that was just one question I wanted you guys to talk about.
That's question. That's interesting, because it comes back to almost like the whole discussion of like, how far back can we take it to saying like, is this thing human?
It's Joy. Yeah. Cause I think The only thing I think is still stirring, and we don't need to dwell on it because it looks like you're digging up another question. But I think I love them.
No,
by the way, too. This is dope.
Awesome.
But,
I hope this is okay. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because, like you said, like with fear, like what's the effect of programming fear into a robot? And I feel like it's realness or like the fakeness of realness. Like being in the design world, if I'm trying to create a composite photo, like if you make it look too good, people are like, that's fake. Like you put that together, but there's almost a rawness that you need to add to a photo to make people think it's real because they're like, that's believable. Like, oh, that person would have, like I was just watching these guys called Corridor Digital who they do like CG effects and stuff, and they fixed a scene from the Scorpion King because it's known.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yes, I saw that. Yep.
Yeah, and so like that whole, just hearing them talk about it is they're like, he looks too real, or he looks too good, he looks too waxy. People don't look like this. If you were in a giant tomb for thousands of years, you'd have like grit and dirt and like sheen on your face, and you'd be kind of gross and like, you know, and so they basically add in all this stuff that most people would be like, well, no, that makes it like look bad, but it's like, but like that adds realness to how he looks. And so from an emotional standpoint, I almost wonder if there's this question that I feel like Love asks Kay when he first goes to get the little orb thing, is he's like, are you satisfied with our product? And like there's this thing of like, is she doing maybe even more than, or like is she programmed to do that? So and I feel like that's getting too heady, and that could derail into a whole thing, but I think that's the one thing that was interesting is like, could that be part of Joy's programming?
Yeah,
is
I think
to learn fear, to learn human attributes that like because I feel like it's what's awesome about like how we're designed as human beings is like on all levels of emotion, there's like they always elicit responses. Like if we were all happy all the time, like that doesn't make us all happy. But it's like, but there's a level of like, but if you're afraid, I have a reaction. I might become courageous. I might become scared too. I might become, and so if Joy is learning from Kay, you know, over like, Kay feels fear. He doesn't know who he is, and like all this stuff. But anyway, that's
I think
two in the weeds.
Just to close out on that thought is the fact that they don't actually like fully explain what Joy actually is or what her capabilities are. We just see snippets of because there's that one scene where it like just randomly pans to a billboard of her to show us like, this is just. I think the first time they actually show her billboard of like, she's just. Like a companion
product,
bot.
yeah.
But they don't really explain what she's programmed to be able to do, and so when we see her feel love and fear and stuff, I think it's supposed to create that dissonance of like, is she supposed to be feeling this? Like, is this real? Is it? And it's kind of just another layer of that question of realness and what is humanity and emotions. And if an AI can feel emotions, and we say that's not human,
right?
Why does a replicant feeling emotions make it human? So I don't know. That was just my last thought.
Cool.
You got more questions over there?
I got a bunch. And to close out the conversation too, I also think about the scene where, again, the blonde replicant came to his apartment. So that completed that made Kay's relationship with Joy as real as it would ever get, because now it went beyond being an AI; it was physical. He did not see that blonde. He saw Joy in his own mind. You could tell he was seeing Joy, and that's something he would never have experienced otherwise. But it was almost like consummating a relationship, that kind of thing. I thought that was interesting that they included that, because I think it was so important that they did, so that you saw how important she was to him.
And I believe that Joy was the one who got her, or like called her.
Well, that's the thing about that instance, though, is
the
fact that she had the functionality to be able to sync with like a physical human, though. Suggests that like she's programmed to do that for guys, like to get like a physical. But for Kay, I think for Kay that moment was different than it was for Joy. Because for Joy it was just being able to fulfill his desires. For Kay it was like the consummation of like, this is real to me. Even if she's not real, this is real. Like what I'm feeling is a real emotion. Sort of. So it's like it's a weird two-sided thing. Also, I remember seeing that scene for the first time, and I was like, the special effects for these folks are just incredible. Like just how to, like, I was trying to rack my brain watching it
this time around. I was like, how did they do that? Like, how did you?
Because they make it
get
feel
these-
real with
yeah,
like,
because it's like, but they're synced
fluttering,
and stuff,
yeah.
and it's like I don't know if they were CG'd or if like they actually did real people so they could get some of the stuff more accurate, and did they just like overlay and resize and
they had like
whatever?
two
It's just
people
like,
act
oh
out
my
the scene,
gosh.
but then overlaid them maybe or
yeah,
something.
it's just like it's just craziness.
that was very
but
cool.
anyway,
Yeah.
so
All right,
What do you got for us?
So the next thing I want you, here it is, blah, 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 discuss. I thought it was fascinating that 2 of the 3 major female characters were named Joy and Love. I think that's crazy. And
I did not
here's
connect
some
that.
things that I thought about was Kay felt joy. Just weird. This is kind of weird.
I like-
so
I like
he
where this is
felt
going.
joy, but his joy died. And once his joy died, he had to kill love.
holy frick.
Now, and
Love killed his joy.
Yes.
So then he had to kill love.
No, what? That's why.
gosh.
Doesn't that make your head explode?
What?
And then think about that. Love was beautiful, but love was also cruel. I mean,
It's Shakespearean. Like there's
Yeah.
like a
that was
Wow.
to me that was genius.
I
that
feel
they
like
named
that's
those
almost
two
like
characters like that.
Wallace's psyche, though. Like he knew what he was
Perhaps.
doing. Like he's gonna create a thing that's like beautiful, and her name is
Yeah.
Love.
Oh my
But she's also
freaking
gonna
gosh.
But
Wallace
I just want
seems
you
like the
guys to
kind of
talk
guy
about
who's-
that a little bit because I
boy.
found it fascinating.
I got to process. That was. When did you make that connection, or
What?
when did you?
I don't know. Probably, I think halfway through the second time I saw it, and then I was thinking about names. I was thinking about the characters themselves, and thinking about what they did and what their function was in the movie.
Wow.
And going, that's just bizarre. Like, who
Yeah,
thought of this?
it's one of those things
Who
where
thought of
gosh.
this?
it
was
blows my
genius.
mind,
I
but
just
at the
have the
same time,
stupidest smile right now. I'm like, that's just
yeah.
Genius. It was.
I feel like it's
Yes.
one of those subtle things that like doesn't play a huge role in like really what happens, but it reveals like the way the world perceives
Oh,
things
yeah.
almost. Like I feel
Mhm.
like the fact that this character whose name is Love is the way that she is tells us more about who Wallace is as a person.
Mhm.
That his like main sidekick person or whatever, like whatever you want to call her. Her name is Love, but she's like this extremely cruel person.
And she's always on a mission. She's like out for stuff.
And
Yeah.
she's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love is beautiful.
So it kind of like
But she's dangerous.
Oh.
it kind
Gotta
of
watch out for Love.
it kind of gives you like just a
Yeah.
picture into Wallace's psyche.
A
For
little-
sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I think like I have all these synapses firing on like different planes because like from the writer's perspective, I'm like, that is the most genius way to inject characterization across like 5 different people because all of a sudden those names become a symbol for K. It becomes a symbol for the AI and the replicants, and are they human? Are they not? It becomes a description of Wallace, as you were saying, Phil, like Wallace's personality and what he really cares about, and what he's kind of like he is God in this movie. Like that's his manipulation, is to create a synthetic love, to create something that is that, and it's like she's almost symbolically and ironically named this because of how much she is actually like the emotion love, which he's creating fake versions of in all these replicants is like synthetic emotions
Yeah.
that are very real and tangible, but they're also like made to like function that way. But man, dude, I feel like, oh gosh, I don't even know what
That's
to
one of
think.
those things where it's just like like you said,
It's just
it's
genius.
genius naming. Like
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
It just adds like another layer to the complexity of the relationships in the movie, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's more to it than that.
Yeah,
Other than trying to like give meaning to why the characters are named the way they're named, kind of.
I feel like it just serves a narrative purpose of like, it serves a bunch of different purposes, but I feel like for me what's exciting and exhilarating about you bringing that revelation is it shows like, it almost puts a pin on Kay's emotions, like what he's actually feeling, and like what, the symbolic, like I said, very Shakespearean, almost like tragedy of like Kay finding out he's a human and being very real, but in the end, the only way he truly, you said this like way earlier, Phil, like he finds his true humanity at the very end when he's laying on the steps dying, knowing that Decker's going in to see his daughter, and he's done the most human thing that he can do, which is sacrifice himself for a cause. And like, but then he dies, and like that's the cap on his humanity. And so like all these emotions and things that are very real and very human are being portrayed through this replicant, and it's just like, man, that's just bonkers.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that's
cool.
all I got.
I'm
So
glad.
I have a more less weighty question. I don't know if you've ever heard the question, but is Deckard a replicant?
Okay.
Ooh.
Okay, so right away,
Which kind of hinges on you having seen the final
So-
cut, I guess. But
Ridley Scott believes that Deckard was a replicant.
yep.
Harrison Ford says he was not.
Ooh.
Do you know if Denis has he said anything?
No.
I feel like this movie makes it seem
But
like
I
he
have
wasn't.
read Phil Dick's book, Blade Runner, Electric Sheep,
Yeah.
Dream. You know, that was the subtitle. And I'm not going to say it because I want people to read books. So
It's a good book.
it is a great book. But he implies, but I don't think he really ever answers the question himself. And this is the author of the story. And here's I actually had a question here about this. This is great, Phil, that you brought this up. Is Deckard a replicant? But the real question is, does it matter?
And I think that's the question he asked in the book, definitely, because Philip Dick was all about like reality and like what is real and does it matter what real is and what doesn't. But
Yeah, does it matter if he's a replicant? Or did it change who Deckard was? No, it doesn't change it at all.
Yeah. I feel like
2049 makes it seem that he's more human than
Yes,
the first movie.
absolutely.
Like they almost like canonized his humanness in the 2049. Whereas if you watch the final cut with like the unicorn scene and stuff, Ridley Scott makes it seem more ambiguous or like more like, yeah.
Well, and I don't know if it was, I can't tell you what time it was or which time I watched the original movie that I thought more that he was a replicant than not. But I thought, how could a human hunt these things? How could a human have the capability of hunting replicants if it wasn't already faster and stronger? And now he wasn't a Nexus 6. There's no doubt, because he had been around a long time.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a Nexus 6, which is what Roy and all those other guys were. They were all Nexus 6. So they were that next generation. So he wasn't as strong or as fast. Obviously, when Leon was beating the crap out of him. But how could you if you weren't? Yeah, what is that the guy said, Holton, or what? Not Holton, but his boss, that stupid police sergeant, was like, this guy's he's a wrecking machine or something, he said to the other guy. He's got a reputation. He's killed lots of replicants.
Yeah. Which I think is interesting because the first movie is asking more, does it matter whether or not you're a replicant or a human? Whereas the second movie is more jumping back to trying to parse that, almost like define it a little bit more.
And I think after watching the second movie the third time, I kind of answered my question, though. I think I did. Because we know that Anna is the child of Deckard and Rachel.
Yep.
Rachel was special. We know that nobody's ever defined that, but she was special. First of all, she didn't have an expiration date. Who knows how else Tyrell made her special?
She made it past like 100 questions on the boy comp
and
test.
was she capable of procreating? Maybe that was another way that she was quote special.
Well, they even said in this movie, like, Tyrell actually did create the capability to procreate, but he like never revealed it to anybody. So it's
Right,
like
so
he's
it
trying to
could have been her.
retroactively.
It
So
could have
she
been
could have
her.
been it, yeah.
Which would have meant that Deckard was human. I mean, it's because if she was able to procreate, she was the only one who was ever able to do that.
Because he wasn't as advanced as she was.
No, and
So then he almost has to be human?
yes, because otherwise they couldn't have a child. Yeah, so I think
So I think this movie makes
to
it more
me,
definitive, yeah.
I think it does.
So what do you guys think of that moment then when Deckard is sitting across from Wallace? And I can't remember how exactly Wallace phrased it, but he kind of alludes to the fact that, like, couldn't it have been programming that made you two fall in love? Like, couldn't it have been... Like, he kind of alludes to that again, like throwing a huge wrench into it of like, was it just emotion? Or like, was it... This was the plan from the beginning. And granted, he's coming from a very specific viewpoint because he's like, I'm the orchestrator of all things, essentially. Like,
yeah, I mean, I
you know.
took that scene to more mean he was talking about Rachel specifically. Like, is the only reason she loved you because of her programming? Like, is
Sure.
that the only reason
Yeah.
this whole thing spawned? Because I don't think that has to be like a mutual thing.
Yeah.
Like Joey and Kay, like one person can be actually in love and the other person could be programmed, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he was getting at, but I don't know.
And I think about this scene, which to a lot of people's controversial because he was a little aggressive with her. So when he first kissed her, she had no freaking clue what was going on. When you think that scene, if you could watch that scene, she was just like, he was kind of filling in the blanks for her. So I would argue against Wallace programming her to love him.
Because he had to tell her what it was to actually love.
I'm going to kiss you. Hello? Say to me that you love me. Tell me that. And she didn't even know what to do. She was just kind of like, okay, I love you. And she didn't even know what it meant.
It's
By
an
the end of the
interesting
movie, she
scene
did.
because if you look at it through the lens of he's like taking advantage of her, it is a very creepy, weird scene.
It is.
But I think this third time I watched it, I saw it more through like he knows that there's a connection between them and she knows it, but she doesn't know why because she hasn't learned it yet. And then it makes the scene more like, okay, he's still being a little aggressive because whatever, but he's like teaching her the feelings that she already has, like how to, like what humans do in this situation.
It's a more it'd be
it's-
like any of us who are more experienced. Say we'd gone out on 50 dates, and you go out on a girl that'd been on, this was her first date, and you wanted to kiss her goodnight. Like, how would you do that?
Probably not in the way Decker does it anyway.
Probably not, but
especially since that was like their first date. But but it is a sort of
you
like
know what I
he's
mean.
teaching.
He is.
So in the second movie, it's kind of weird that he's suggesting she was programmed, but I don't know if Deckard buys into that. I think because of everything that happened, I think Deckard is pretty confident. Like, no, we were in love,
and
that's why he was able to turn away from the fake Rachel and say like
Her
there
eyes
was
were
more.
Yeah.
that's not my Rachel.
Yeah.
And you think too about, I mean, if Wallace wants to make that inference, the fact that Deckard met Rachel at all was random. That was so random. There was no way that was going to happen.
Yeah.
It wasn't like somebody planned that to happen. It just did. And so that meeting was accidental in a lot of ways. You know, the boss was like, yeah, they got some Nexus 6 over at the Tyrell Corporation. Hook her up to the machine. And then what did Deckard say? What if the machine doesn't work? Oops. And he didn't have an answer. He just kind of looked at him like, oh, okay. But it was random. So Wallace, shut the heck up, man. I hate Wallace. I'm supposed to hate Wallace, but I hate him as a character. I mean, he is truly, kind of circling around that and segueing again to the next comment thing to talk about is Wallace is more soulless than any replicant in either one of the movies.
Absolutely.
He truly is soulless. I mean, you know, it's dark
specifically
and twisted.
by his definition too, like
Oh.
how he's defining humanity. Like he's worse than any of them. Like
you just wonder how somebody could ever get to being that. Like, he doesn't show any emotion either, ever. He shows no emotion, period. He never gets angry. It doesn't matter what you do to him or any of his things. It doesn't matter. He's just like a creepy robot guy. He is his replicants almost. You know, I think that's interesting how they portrayed him as less human than any other character in either movie.
Yeah.
I knew that subconsciously that was going on, but I never actually thought about the fact that he's actually portrayed as less human than most of the replicants in the movie.
Well, and he sees through those little weird clicky things that are flying around too. It's I always was like, what the
that's
frick
good
are those
sound.
things?
That was good job, Phil.
But I think that's interesting too. Is it's like his vision is clouded. Like that's almost like a symbolic thing. Is like he doesn't see.
He sees
value
through
in the
technology.
world. Like he sees through technology.
His eyes are technology.
Yeah, and so he doesn't see. Yeah, exactly. Like another thing, it's like he doesn't see the way that these replicants and these other people see the world. Like he sees everything as through what he's created, and so because of that, everything just kind of ebbs and flows. So
Dang.
oof, deep
Crazy stuff.
Oh my goodness,
man, that's a good movie.
It's like when you think about it, I was like last night I was like, man, this is just I'm excited, but then talking more, it's it's uncovering all the gems that are
well, and it's
buried
interesting
deep
too
in
because there's
what it
all of
is.
these philosophical ideas and stuff, but
Yeah.
like the movie itself is just like well constructed. The character, like
Yeah.
some people have told me like they feel like it's slow, but in my mind, like it is slow, but that's intentional. It's supposed to, like, you're supposed to get this sense of like the world is just this weird like big place, and like it's almost like empty.
Yeah.
It's like so full but so empty, and you just get this like sense of like you're building up to this point, and it's like a slow crawl. Even the first movie is like slow in regards to like action movies, if you're expecting that.
Right.
But I think it adds to the philosophical weight that all of this stuff we've discussed. It allows you the time to like dwell on these ideas. Every scene is like milking the ideas and forcing you to face the questions they're asking in a way.
Yeah.
I find it it's interesting because I find it a little sad to a point that we can have this amazing discussion about this movie that wasn't that successful at the box office. Let's
Yeah,
just say
I actually have the
it
numbers
bombed,
here.
and-
Like it was.
It won a couple Oscars though for
Well,
like
that's the thing
set
is
design. and-
domestically. So this is domestic U.S. It was 93 million is what it
Which
did.
is-
Worldwide was 168 million.
which is nothing still.
But it's crazy how the U.S. was like almost half of like
right.
like what the world did, which is crazy.
Well, and I find it sad because we all love the Avengers movies. We love Marvel movies. I get that. It's mindless entertainment, and honestly, we could not sit around for this long and have a discussion about any Avengers movie.
Well, we could, but
Well, maybe you guys could. You guys
we've
probably
definitely
could.
done
Okay,
it, but
so-
not on the same level. It's usually
yeah,
about
yeah.
the
This is
movie
what I'm saying,
itself,
yeah.
not about the ideas
Right.
behind the movie.
And
Yeah.
so I think it's a little sad that, and maybe it's because we're all geeks that we can do this, but I think it should be that a lot more people are having these kind of conversations about the movie or this kind of a movie, that people don't find this, in general, people don't find this kind of a movie interesting or entertaining or engaging, because it is a little more thought. You have to be a little more thoughtful. And it's too bad because, again, you like, in ancient days, Mr. Bears, when you were a kid, I mean, I think of some of the movies that we saw, and I think about it comes to my mind MASH real quick. MASH was a very entertaining movie, but there was a lot behind it. There was a lot to it when you look back and you see what the message was that they were sending. Around the same time was Kelly's Heroes. And I have argued with friends forever that I think that Kelly's Heroes was probably one of the best anti-war movies ever made. And they're like, what are you talking about? They were shooting each other. There was World War II. There were tanks and there was guns and soldiers and stuff. I'm like, okay, now let's think about what was going on in the movie. And then we started having these discussions like, okay, that's what I wanted to talk about. But I think there were movies with a lot more hidden gems, as you said.
Yeah.
A lot more hidden ideas that you can talk about back then
yeah.
than there are now.
Yeah.
I think. Because I think for some reason, movies seem to be simpler. They throw everything out there for you so you don't have to think almost. Like, what was their relationship? Oh, well, it's pretty obvious what their relationship was. It's,
yeah, no, I
it's
agree.
not
I
complex.
think, I mean, it's a common complaint today that most things are like sequels or a part of some universe or a remake. Like Disney's rehashing all their movies in a year, apparently, and like it's kind of just this constant flux. But I think the problem is like that's what sells. Like that's that's what people are dumping their dollars into, and then Blade Runner comes out and like the movie's fantastic. It's a more cerebral, slow film. Like there's not bombastic, crazy action. Like the visual,
The guns get fired like 4 times.
yeah,
like,
that's
the whole
true.
the visual style
Yeah,
of the
that's
movie
true.
is like vibrant and beautiful, but also very subtle in the way that it's like also every part of the movie is forcing you towards the ideas about the movie.
Sure.
And I think most movies, like you're saying nowadays, they're just throwing the ideas. Even like Marvel, like I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
Oh,
but most of that
absolutely.
is like it's just the hero's journey. Like they're just throwing the same type of story in your face. It's just differently nuanced, and like I've said, we could have hours of discussions about the Marvel movies, but usually it's about the movie itself rather than like having a
big idea.
2-hour discussion or whatever about like the ideas and barely even touching about like what we liked about the movie itself, Blade
Yeah,
Runner.
sure.
Because we
Yeah.
haven't talked about the set design or like the character. Like we've talked more about like the idea of what it means to be a human which is like that transcends the movie.
It's pretty.
It's
big
the Matrix.
question.
It's Westworld.
Right.
It's
Yes.
Terminator. It's all these things, and it. I don't know. So,
Yeah, and it's tough. And I feel like when I say younger, I feel like even the past couple years, I would get more angry about that being the reality. Like I'm saddened by that because just like you said,
I want more awesome Blade Runners, but they keep not being successful.
Yeah,
Even the
well,
first one was
the thing.
a bomb. I think
No,
it
it
became
wasn't.
a classic.
It's a cult classic. Just
yeah.
like Serenity is a cult classic. you
Yeah.
know, people.
But I think that's the hard part. Is it's like the beauty and double-edged sword of creativity and narrative and mediums is some use it as a tool for escape from the real world, which I think in some that's a Marvel movie,
valid.
like it's
That's
escapism
fine.
and
Yeah,
it's good.
Absolutely. Yeah, we
But
need that.
there's other stuff, and I think this is where Phil and I tend to gravitate towards, and it sounds like you yourself as well, that it can be a mirror to our souls, and it can be a mirror to who we are. And I think of the things that I just get like so jazzed and juiced and like wig out, and people are like, dude, calm down. Like, it's just a movie, but there's something, but it's like, no, but that's like Endgame is just a movie, but like, I think of, something that I've been really into and watching is like, we talk Attack on Titan all the time. Like that was a show that literally changed my life, like forever. It changed my
Your
degree
whole
path.
college trajectory.
It changed everything because
Isn't that
all of a
wild?
sudden it was a fictional thing that reflected this part of myself that I was like, I resonate with stories that I know are not real, that I know are about fake things that are built in this ridiculous fantastical world where there's giant humanoid things that eat people, but there's this human projection in it that is like, that is what I want to do for other people. Like, I want to capture the raw emotions that we feel and put them into fantastical settings that are consumable, but at the end of the day, like, you walk out and you're like, I'm not the
can't
same.
help but not
I can't
think about
Yeah, you're
things.
like, I can't, like with this movie, like, we can't help but not think, like, what does our world look like? Like, what does the world of technology what is that going to look like in 20 years from now?
Yeah.
Amazon's already taken over the world. Like, are we 2 decades from cyberpunk territory or pre?
And I feel like
there's big questions that this movie elicits, and I think, like, it's hard, but I feel like that's the natural order of the world, just because people, I just don't think the vast majority of people, and not to knock people's preference for more just like bombastic, Fast and Furious style movies, but I think they just don't want to be challenged by fiction.
I think like the majority of society watches movies because it's entertaining. Like, it's entertainment. They don't want to come home after an 8-hour day of work and they're exhausted and tired of doing a job they don't want to do or something, and they come home and now they have to watch a movie that forces them to like question
Contend with their existence.
Like, they just want to watch something that'll help them chill out or calm down for a bit, or like,
And that makes
I think
sense,
even
too.
like the Matrix, like if you think about the Matrix on like the surface level, that's just a dope action movie. Like,
it is. It's
like
great.
most of the philosophical ideas, like, you really have to read into it to actually get about it, but it never forces you to actually think about the ideas. Like, most people you talk to about the Matrix, they're like, dude, there's some like, remember
the slow motion, like, yeah,
slow motion
whoa.
bullet thing, like it. But I think a movie like that, because it's both cerebral and action oriented, that's why it was so popular. Whereas like a Blade Runner, even the first and the second one, like, they're not really like action films. They're like presented as action films. Even like if you look at the trailers for this 2049, like, they made it seem like it was going to be like this action detective film. It absolutely wasn't. And I was like, man, people are going to be so bummed out by this.
And they were.
I remember
People were
ticked.
reading reviews, and people were like, "This movie's slow. What the heck is this? This is dumb. Where's the fight?" And you're like, literal reviews complaining about like, it's not enough. And I'm like, this is not a Schwarzenegger movie. Like, this is not a.
And I think it just
flick.
comes down to why you're consuming media. And I think for
exactly.
me, the majority of the time I'm consuming things because I'm looking for inspiration or I'm looking for big ideas. And I love having conversations like this with people about ideas and storytelling and character arcs and different things. And then the other 10% of the time, I'm just looking for something dumb to watch because like, because I want to like chill out. But most of the time I'm looking to it for like ideas and stuff. But that's not everybody's reality.
Well, see, in Blade Runner for me has been, the stories are great. The characters are great. but the environment itself has always been a draw because I love those kind of environments, the cyberpunk environment. I love it. I love the dystopian environment, but this isn't like a divergent dystopian. This is dark dystopian, and I love that. Just the scenes and man, the rain, whatever. And then the other piece of it is the music, and I'm really big on music and soundtracks and stuff, and that's the other thing that makes both of these movies amazing. Is the music is just perfect for this. Like when he's chasing after them and they're on the seawall, and just that kind of screaming whatever they were music, you're going, oh, this is who thought of this? This is great. It's not just the scene and the darkness and all those things.
And I like that they used like the more like cinematic, but also like technical, like the first movie type of music, like I don't know what to call it, like electronic or
like synth.
Yeah, it's synth
based music,
because that's all that Vangelis
but a more
did.
modernized version of it. And again, it's another thing that points it, like it doesn't take you out of the movie, where a lot of like I think about like the new Hellboy movie, where like a lot of the music in that, you're like, why did they choose these songs? Like this is just out of, like, it takes you out of the experience of the movie.
That's important.
Whereas
absolutely.
I think the Blade Runner soundtrack, the only time that I ever actually consider the soundtrack is when it's like, man, this music like fits the emotion and the intensity of the ideas so succinctly that you're just like, you can't help but be like enamored by what you're watching.
The perfect song when you say that is Blade Runner Blues. I know you probably don't remember that song, but it's when Deckard comes home from doing what he had to do, and he goes and he puts that blanket around him. He goes out to that balcony he had, and usually like 80,000 stories up, and it's just kind of this melodic. It's music I fall asleep to sometimes, because there's actually on YouTube there's like an 8-hour repeat of this Blade Runner Blues, and I'm like, yes, I'm gonna sleep. But that music was just perfect because it made you feel what Deckard was probably feeling after he had done that. It just drew you right in. To your point, Phil, it was part of the movie. And wow, I feel just like he does. I'm confused, and I don't know to think about what I just did. You know, bluesy is kind of what it, but it was synthetic. It
had like that 80s synth sound to it,
and it was amazing.
And
there's a lot of music from that movie, but this one was good too.
I think Hans Zimmer did a really good job of
capturing the vibe,
making it modern, but also having the same feel and aesthetic.
He really was true to Vangelis' legacy.
Definitely,
that was great.
Awesome,
good stuff, guys.
Good old Hans. All right, well, we're at the hour 45 mark, so this is probably one of our longer ones. So, Mr. Barris, thanks a ton for those questions. Those are awesome.
Thank you guys for having me. This is
absolutely
amazing. I love talking about things I love. So
same.
Thank you for having me here,
for sure.
guys.
Yeah, and I remember, I think we came up with the idea for doing specifically this again because of our
last time
when
Zach
brought up Blade Runner and stuff, and we kind of started diving in.
Jumped on him like, what? You can't hate Blade Runner.
I was like, but anyway, so before we close out, what should people check out that you're working on? So you said Cubic Shenanigans
is our podcast.
That?
Sure. You can go on Apple iTunes. You can go to Spotify and just look up on the podcasts. You can go to the store and just look up Cubic Shenanigans, Warhammer podcast, and that's where we are.
Right on.
So
cool.
That's great.
We'll have to do a Warhammer episode or something sometime, and you can educate us on.
You bring me the questions.
Right. So how do we do this? Right on. Cool.
It's fun.
So some last plugs for us. As a reminder to everybody, popculturepunks.com for all your pop culture punks needs. We got some blogs up there of some pop culture recs. We have all our episodes, all the destinations, direct links to Redbubble and Threadless for all our merch, and a direct contact page for people to send in idea submissions and all that good stuff. And that's it.
That's all she wrote.
Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for this. Hopefully, like, people are like, oh, rattled. But
before you go today, remember to entertain the question: Are you human?
Are you human?
And what makes you human?
What makes you human? Thanks again for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one. And until then, we bid you all a fond cowabunga.
Voices in my heart tell me job security, but I've been dreaming about packing it all up, 'cause the war in me just won't relent till there's nothing left but dust. So what do you do when the walls start closing in, and everyone you love tells you it's all just in your head?